Hi students, this is Mr. Eckert and we're going to go through the second, actually what is the second part of Target C17, the cellular respiration equation. The target says you should be able to write out the correct reactants and products in the photosynthesis and the respiration reactions. And when we say respiration, we mean cellular respiration. Now, by the way, before we start this target, let me just say that this set of targets that we're covering, that we're ending the cells unit with, is probably, most students would say, one of the most challenging set of targets that we cover in biology the whole year. So I'm not saying that to scare you. I want to encourage you to think about another target that was probably pretty challenging for you, and that was the protein synthesis target, learning about transcription and translation. So you know that I have encouraged you in class on multiple occasions to be reviewing every day 15 minutes outside of class. And I am sure that those of you that were successful on that part of the test on protein synthesis, the students who were most successful were probably spending time reviewing on a regular basis. They didn't wait until the night before the test to start reviewing. They did that well before the test. They maybe asked some questions. They used some of the links in the help folder to help them learn that material, and that's why they were successful. So if you were successful on that protein synthesis target, think about those things that you did to help yourself be successful. Do some of those same things for these targets here as we end cells. And if you weren't successful, think about doing something different. Use the help folder and some of those resources in there. Ask questions, come for help, begin your review well before the test. All right, so here we go, the second part of Target C17 on cellular respiration. So what is cellular respiration? Well, just like photosynthesis, it's a chemical reaction. It's a chemical reaction that's carried out by all living things in their cells, and that includes plants. Plants do cellular respiration. What it does is it changes chemical or stored energy into usable energy in the form of ATP. So here's the formula. It starts uh, up here with the reactants on the left, and you probably recognize this as glucose plus oxygen, yield or produce water plus carbon dioxide plus ATP. Now, again, just like in the photosynthesis reaction, you can remember this in terms of the chemical formulas, or you can remember it in terms of the words written down here. Either way is totally fine. And I should say that the order of these reactants and to the right, the products, the order doesn't matter as long as these three products are to the right of the arrow and these two reactants are to the left of the arrow. So that's cellular respiration. This is happening in the cells of nearly all living things. The goal is to change glucose, stored energy, into usable energy in the form of ATP. And oxygen is needed in order to do that. So why is it important? Well, we've kind of already talked about that. It's supplying the usable energy in the form of ATP that all living things, all living cells, need to carry out all the processes of life. So your body, my body needs energy. All living things need energy. How do they get it? They get it by breaking down glucose and changing it into ATP. So just like photosynthesis had different parts, so does cellular respiration. You want to think of cellular respiration starting with glycolysis, and then it moves into what's called aerobic respiration, which actually has two parts as well, or anaerobic respiration. So we'll start with glycolysis. Glycolysis, if you just look at the word, if you knew absolutely nothing about glycolysis, look at this word and what word do you kind of see in glycolysis? Well, I'll bet you would say, well, I kind of see glucose. And that's a good hint then, because it involves glucose. So where does it take place? Well, it takes place in the cytoplasm of the cell. What happens in glycolysis? Well, the glucose which is a large stored energy molecule, is broken down into two smaller stored energy molecules, and those are called pyruvates. Now, just like if you were splitting a log in half, it would take you some energy in order to do that. Well, it takes the cell some energy in order to split the glucose in half. So it takes two molecules of ATP to split the glucose, but good thing for the cell, it actually gets 4 ATP out of that reaction. So it puts in 2 ATP, but it gets 4 out. So there's a net gain of 2 ATP molecules as a result of this chemical process called glycolysis. That'd be a great deal if we all could get that at the bank. We go in and we give them $2 and they give us $4 back. The cell gets that deal, but you and I, of course, don't. All right, so after glycolysis is over, after the glucose is split and formed into two pyruvates, if there's plenty of oxygen, then what happens next is aerobic respiration. If there's no oxygen or not enough oxygen, then anaerobic respiration will take place. So, Target 19 says that you should be able to describe the steps in aerobic respiration in terms of inputs and outputs. And we'll go ahead and go right into that target next. So if oxygen is present, then aerobic respiration occurs. Aerobic respiration, I said, had two parts, something called the Krebs cycle and something called the electron transport chain. The Krebs cycle is also known as the citric acid cycle. So, of course, the person who figured this out, his last name was Krebs. That's why it's called the Krebs cycle. Where does it take place? It takes place in the mitochondria. So remember those pyruvate molecules that we got from glycolysis? Those are going to be the inputs. Those are going to go into the Krebs cycle, and they're used to make two more ATP molecules, some carbon dioxide, and NADPH. And you'll remember from before that NADPH is just another energy molecule. So that's the Krebs cycle. Now what happens in the electron transport chain? Well, that NADPH that was made in the Krebs cycle goes into the electron transport chain. This occurs in the inner membranes of the mitochondria. So here you see an artist's rendition, an artist's model of a mitochondria. It's been cut open so you can see inside there's this inner membrane. And the electron transport chain actually occurs on this inner membrane. So it needs the NADPH that was made from the Krebs cycle, and then the oxygen combines with hydrogen ions, and that forms water. Of course, if you add oxygen to hydrogen, you of course are going to get water. But the big payoff is this right here. The cell gets 34 ATP molecules from the electron transport chain. You probably want to put a star by that in your notes because that's where most of the ATP in cellular respiration is made. It's made during this electron transport chain. So if we total them all up, remember there was 2 made from glycolysis, a net of 2. There was 2 ATP that were made from the Krebs cycle, and there was 34 that were made from electron transport chain. So that's a total of 38 ATP. All right, we're going to pause there, and if you have any questions, make sure you ask.